I think first on the agenda, we need to call the meeting to order. Just I'm not sure that's something you do, or do Matthew does. I'm not sure.
Well, do we need a roll call? I don't know if we need a roll call when it's only two people.
No, you can just jump into it.
Okay, we're good.
Okay.
We got a quorum. We're good.
All right, call to order then. So thank you both for being available today. We wanted to make sure that we were able to meet with the subcommittee well before bringing the mid-year report for the last fiscal year and decision on the next fiscal year to the council. So I thought we'd start off with recapping the program from last fiscal year before jumping into moving on with the decisions for this upcoming fiscal year. So recapping fiscal year 2021-22 of the program, the city distributed its largest amount of grants ever, 19 grants total to 17 organizations at its highest funding amount ever, a level of $250,000, which is $50,000 higher than the previous year. And as both of you likely know, due to the ongoing effects of the pandemic, the CSFA subcommittee and the city council ultimately approved renewing funding for the 7 organizations that received funding in fiscal year 2020. And that was at the level of $200,000. So that was unchanged. And then in addition, council also approved an additional $50,000 of smaller grants for more general community serving projects and programs, similar to how the program ran in prior years. And so that's how we got to the total of $250,000 for 19 grants. And we have received all of those mid-year reports as of last Thursday. So I'll start going through those this week and putting a report together for presentation to the city council. Now with that in mind, did want to talk about what the CFA subcommittee would like the plan to be for this upcoming year, whether you'd like us to continue with the program as it was the previous year. We could have a specific focus or have it be general grant funding like we've had in prior years. So I did want to open that up to you both.
Yeah, I think my sense about that is that we're still in COVID. We've still got everybody in need, and that we ought to be not trying to change the focus at this point, but continuing to support the people we've been supporting. I would also like to see us increase the amount that we support. I don't know if there's anybody we missed out on last year because there's no list here for me to refer to. But the only sector that I can think of that we might want to increase funding for, increased consideration of, would be small businesses.
Yeah, I think the small businesses, that might be through a different program, like maybe through the Economic Recovery Initiative. I do agree with you that we're still in COVID. I would like to see, one focus I'm interested in seeing is mental health. So I know we have the CARES program going on, but there may be other mental health oriented projects that are worth looking at. Like several months ago now, I had a tour of, like Coast Pride, and, they were talking about, funding just for them, for their programs and things. And, I said, one of the things that is important to me is that we fund partnerships as opposed to giving everybody money in their individual silos. But they did say that one program they're very interested in where they could network with other organizations would be on mental health issues. A lot of their clients have, issues with identity and gender that require counseling and things like that. And that they were happy to, and I think they already are partnering like, I think ALAS and maybe Boys and Girls Club and things. So mental health is really important. Mental health awareness. I agree on the small business piece, but I think that's a separate program. And I agree, generally speaking, that, yeah, a lot of those COVID-related needs are still active now and need to be addressed. And, you know, depending on whether staff believes we have the resources available, you know, I would be interested in increasing. The other area, which I think is really important as we try to build social equity and social capacity, is on capacity building, you know, grants for smaller organizations to get board development and fundraising, you know, expertise. So these would be like technical support grants to help them do their job better. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I'm in general agreement with you. The exception is I'd like to, you know, try to give a tweak to mental health services.
And Madam Mayor, when you talk about capacity building or technical support grants, it doesn't sound like you're talking about general operations. You're talking about a specific need that the organization has to grow or develop, and then using this grant to fill that need to enhance their ability to operate in the future. Is that?
Yeah, so, well, you know, I did some capacity building, you know, for Coastal Conservancy, you know, in my local region in Southern California, and that would be identifying groups that have something to offer, have a mission that's consistent with ours, but, you know, maybe they lack understanding of how to run a board, how to do fundraising, how to partner with others, who their other partners might be. Because you know, one of the things that COVID has exposed for us, you know, is the need for, you know, strong nonprofit organizations and strong community partnerships. So by capacity building, I mean how to do those better and to build sustainable organizations. You know, in an emergency, Deborah's doing our emergency connection with the county. You know, like CERT's really important. Other organizations who can do outreach to their membership and their partners. You know, so I think for me, you know, COVID exposed the need to really build social equity. And I think capacity building is part of that, you know.
So would that be like getting specialized training or hiring a consultant to come in and do an evaluation? Is that kind of some of the examples you'd be thinking of for that?
Yeah, you know, like, and maybe we fund somebody, you know, another approach would be to fund somebody ourselves and do, you know, a few large group meetings where multiple organizations can come and get training at the same time, you know, something like that.
It might be worthwhile to work with the chamber in that.
Yeah, you know, the chamber is part of building social equity too, your small business community. It's all interrelated, you know.
But how do we do that with this program? I mean,
well, for instance,
normally somebody comes and asks for a grant, and we say, well, you can't just ask for a grant. You have to specify what it's for, what you're going to accomplish. And aren't you saying the same thing?
Well, we would say up front, you know, we're interested in funding grants for the following purposes. You know, COVID adaptation, you know, building capacity building for nonprofits. And we say the kind of things that would be eligible projects. So trainings, you know, for board development or trainings for how to manage your finances. You know, maybe we give a grant to one lead agency and they're working with a few others to, you know, to do networking more effectively, you know, to build programs together. You know, we might need to consult ourselves with somebody local, you know, like maybe Heidi. Is it Heidi? No, the woman who's running the Coastside Recovery Initiative. You know, she used to work for the Community Foundation. She might, you know, be able to pinpoint it for us. But it's making our nonprofits bigger and stronger, or at least better and stronger, better networked, and how to do that. You know,
I like the idea of doing that. And I also think that the chamber is trying to do something like that. They have a program where they try to encourage small businesses to grow smart. You know, I don't know how to put it, and I'm not sure what the name of their program is, but I'm wondering if a partnership with the chamber might make sense, and maybe helping the chamber out, asking them if you're willing to work with other nonprofits who aren't chamber members, we'd be willing to give you a grant to because they've got that kind of expertise already.
well, except that building a business and building a nonprofit are quite different things, right? So I've worked for a nonprofit as well as, you know, private entities in the state. And, you know, there's really different things because a nonprofit, you know, doesn't have a lot of fiscal resources. So they have to, you know, be trained in how to manage their money and how to build their boards and, you know, incentivize their boards to raise money and, you know, all do this other stuff. I'm not saying the chamber couldn't do it. You know, it might be that they would be a very effective fiscal agent for other nonprofits that would get money through that partnership. So, and they could discuss it among themselves. You know, we put out our request for, you know, proposals, and you know, it could be, and we give direction like, you people, you know, work together, identify a lead agency or some other approach, you know, to do capacity building for our NGOs, our non-governmental organizations, and that would cover something like the chamber too, if you're talking about an NGO.
Yeah.
The thing about the chamber though is, you know, they're a little different because, you know, they do government lobbying. You know, they might take positions that are antithetical to local nonprofit capacity building. You know, they might not like raising the minimum wage, you know, doing all this other stuff. So the interests are not necessarily the same. That's what I'm thinking. But how do we, you know, get everybody to work together? And certainly they could be a fiscal agent if they were willing to do that. And they might have access to resources that would be appropriate. But I don't think we can treat the business and the nonprofit communities, you know, as fungible. You know, their needs are a little bit different and they provide different services. You know, like we gave $10,000 last year to Cabrillo Education Foundation, but what we were really funding was a partnership that they had with Coast Pride, Alice, and Boys and Girls Club, you know, for this community like resilience hub thing, right? So it was all about funding networking and services for youth, you know, and combining that with access to mental health services and tech, you know, access to computer, digital, you know, resources and stuff like that. So that's kind of a model. I don't know how they ended up doing that. We gave them money. I don't have the report, but so I see what you're saying about involving the chamber, and I think that's a good idea. But we need to you know, it's a little bit different. And giving the chamber money that represents profit-making organizations is a little bit different too. So.
If it would help you all, I can pull up the list of organizations that were funded last year.
While Victor's doing that, Deborah, I think what you were referring to at the chamber was the Small Business Development Center that they're working on.
Yeah.
Which provides different types of training and resources. And so maybe it's as part of our criteria for this coming year, we express a desire for somebody to create a nonprofit development center of some kind to provide similar resources. And to both of your points, it could be the chamber, maybe partnering with like the Thrive Alliance or another nonprofit kind of support group, or maybe it's a different nonprofit that wants to do it. So does that sound like we're kind of on the right track with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. Yeah.
So here we have the 7 organizations that were funded in 2020, 2021, that were also funded last year. $50,000 for Alice includes 2 grants, one at $30,000 for COVID-19 relief and recovery services, and then $20,000 for their mental health clinic. And the rest of these were all for mental health relief and recovery services. And then here we have the smaller grants. So Madam Mayor, as you mentioned, the Career Education Foundation, Alice again for the resource outreach, helping out CERT. And so there were some organizations in here that had programs that are mental health adjacent, for sure.
It'll be interesting to look at the reports to see what they've done with the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd certainly like to see those at some point.
Yeah, I think we can schedule another subcommittee meeting maybe in a month that's just focused on that, because we'll now be able to run with planning for next year, and then we can focus on that. Victor just received all the reports in the last couple of weeks, so we haven't had a chance to go through all of them yet.
And here are the organizations that were not funded last year. So again, maybe there's an opportunity there for this year if there's increased funding.
Yeah, especially if there were a couple of organizations that we actually thought that, the Coastal Conservancy's Explore the Coast grant program might be better, like the Veterans Fishing Program and things like that. Yeah, the athletic boosters, that didn't really make much sense. Now, certainly, early childhood programming, the federal government has yanked support, for families, the child credit and all that stuff. Child care, as we've heard, like from Coastside Recovery Initiative, is super important. I'm sure Jessica could talk about that. So, that's one area I think that was not covered, and maybe, not a good idea to not cover them. So
yeah, I think we've all become more aware of the child care issues, and it's the problems just become more acute. I think one of the few large child care programs on the coast actually closed down during the pandemic, and when Picasso was being threatened with shutdown, that was a really concerning issue for the community.
Yeah, so I do think child care is really, really important. And
I'm happy to put that back up as well, if you'd like to look at any of those organizations or the ones that were funded as well.
Are you comfortable with the direction given, Deborah?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to discuss a little bit more was increasing the funding, and get what your thoughts were on that. My thoughts are twofold. One is increasing the funding, I think, is important. On the other hand, I don't want to set a trend where every year we go up by 50,000. So I think, there are ways to express that desire within the COVID pandemic needs. And, it's not that I don't want to keep increasing it, but I could see us getting on this roller coaster where we go 250, then 300, then 350 the next year. And people expect that kind of an increase from us. And I don't think this program I don't think we can fund that kind of a program consistently year after year after year.
And we will be probably wanting, on the issue of money, we're probably going to want to spend some new money on recommendations of the Coastside Recovery Initiative. And, because we want to be able to help our businesses.
Yes.
And, there is actually some crossover between CRI and this grant program too, because, one of the sections working on the CRI, we're looking at nonprofit capacity building and seeing our nonprofits as an important part of our economy, right? It's an ecosystem, you know, it's housing, it's nonprofit organizations, it's businesses, you know, it's family support services and childcare. So there's, you know, there is a connection there with the CRI too. So we might want to, you know, have a committee meeting where we're actually looking more closely at the CRI recommendations so that we can get a handle on how much money, you know, is a good idea to spend.
That would be great.
Between the two.
Yeah, that would be great.
Like if the final recommendations are coming forward for, you know, some specific things with, and we have a dollar value, I think we need to look at them both together because these are all like, you know, discretionary funding projects that are above and beyond what we would normally spend, right, like public works and stuff like that. So would that be okay, like Matt and Victor, is to also look at CRI and talk about total money that we might be considering during the budget year?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like we definitely want to have a follow-up to this meeting when we have the major reports analyzed and summarized. And maybe we can use that meeting to go over the major reports and just kind of complete that update. And then the second half, we can invite Karen and Erica Wood as well, our consultant, and we can talk about, you know, and by then Victor and I can start to shape this next round. And then we can talk about that proposed approach for this upcoming year in the context of CRI and where the overlap is, and also where things are distinctly different. What applies to community services versus what applies to economic development, because you're right, to some degree, we want to have separate funding pools while recognizing there's a lot of overlap, which we absolutely see. And you know, it's an ecosystem, right? Our nonprofits and our businesses need to be strong for our entire community. And, you know, our community's mental health is affected by their ability to access services, to work, to work in the community as opposed to commuting. You know, there's just so much interconnectedness to it. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And one thing that we haven't discussed yet and that came up at our last meeting, you know, is the need for rental support too. And I don't know if we just relegate that discussion to, you know, the discussion of spending our affordable housing money. You know, I think we gave some grants, didn't we, to like St. Vincent de Paul and Coastside Hope to help with rental assistance. And that's a bigger need than ever before, as far as I can tell. You know, I mean, with no housing inventory, the rents are going through the roof. So how do we help there too? And how do we do that? We do it as part of this? Do we do it separately? So there's a lot of need out there and a lot of demand for money, and we're not, you know, we don't have super deep pockets, but we want to, you know, help where we can. So what about the rental assistance? What do you think?
Yeah, that's been effective. And I'll just explain how that money worked in the process. So you're correct. We granted $100,000 to Coastside Hope and $100,000 to St. Vincent de Paul, but not in vacuums. There's a close working relationship there. So the way it works is Coastside Hope has, 4 or 5 sources of funding for rental assistance programs. And each source of funding comes with its own strings attached and its own requirements and documentation requirements. We structured ours to be as flexible as we could while still being fiscally responsible. But our main criteria were that it needed to be used for individuals who either live in Half Moon Bay or live on the coast and work in Half Moon Bay. And the initial referral always went through Coastside Hope, because again, they have all these different sources, so they can take a look at the person's entire situation and determine the best source of funds for them. And then if they couldn't serve any of their needs based on the restrictions they had, then they provide a referral to St. Vincent de Paul, who is more aligned with how we set up our use of funds. It's a little more flexible. They still do due diligence, but they don't have the same restrictions like making sure the person is documented They don't have to have a formal lease. There just needs to be proof that this money is going towards rent. And so the money that we gave to Coastside Hope was exhausted several months ago. St. Vincent de Paul is still working through the money that they received. But I believe, based on our most recent meeting with them, which was maybe a month and a half ago, they'll have run out of those funds by the end of this fiscal year. So
was that source the affordable housing?
Yeah, it came out of the Affordable Housing Fund and it was restricted to affordable housing emergency support. So they're going to both be hopeful for a renewal of that funding based on our conversations.
When did the funding start?
Do you remember, Victor? Was it last fiscal year or was it even late 2021?
It was early 2021. It might have been the prior fiscal year, actually.
Yeah, I think it was not. So we're in fiscal year 21-22 right now. I think we actually gave the funding towards the end of fiscal year 2020-21. So somewhere in early 2021.
So it's lasted almost a year.
Yeah, because again, there's been so many sources of funds for them to draw upon, but those sources are drying up. There's not as much COVID relief. So the demand for funding is going to increase while the available funding from other sources is going to decrease.
So we might want to move up that discussion, that formal discussion with the council and get that money out sooner rather than later, or at least consider giving that money out sooner rather than later.
We can follow up again with the agencies. Again, the last time we met with them, which was right before the holidays, I believe. Coastside Hope had exhausted it, but they have other sources. St. Vincent de Paul still had some funding left, but both believed that there would be need again in the coming fiscal year. So we can gauge with them whether or not we want to wait till July 1st to issue additional funding, or if they need us to do it sooner. And yeah, we can bring that back to the council, potentially in the context of another housing discussion that may be coming up.
Good.
Yeah, there's a lot of desperation out there. It's not good.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of people that are being evicted, according to Belinda and Joaquin. People are being evicted left and right.
Well, and I was disturbed by the woman at the council meeting who said that it's not just rent increases. There are new requirements or additional requirements. I'd like to know what those additional requirements are. Like, what more strings are they attaching to, having their applications accepted? And that might be at least one area where we might have some leverage, get rid of requirements as opposed to, I just see like when you're adding requirements, you're basically, trying to cut people off, right? You're trying to discourage it, demotivate it, get it out of here. So I think when we're looking at rents and we're looking at assistance, if there's a way that, maybe there's action we can take as a council, some policy actions that deal with these new requirements,
Yeah, one of the thing that woman was talking about, I think, was that the landlord would not rent to her because she was going to be a multifamily. There's more than one family that wanted to rent the landlord's space. That's one issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would be good to find out what those new requirements are for sure. If, we want to make sure they're not being used in a discriminatory way. I don't think, I know that some people have complained about people like on my street, for instance, multifamilies in a house. And somebody checked with the city attorney, but I think it might have been before Catherine. And they said, you can't restrict that. So if people are restricting that and that's against the law, then we need to clamp down on that. I just think the way the housing's going, the trend is only going to be more of us needing to live together.
I think one of the things that we've never done and that I asked for a couple of years ago was a meeting with landlords I would really like to hear from the landlords what their issues are before we start calling them the bad guys. I mean, not that they are or are not bad guys, but I would like to hear what they have to say, what their needs are, and what their issues are. Because I think that makes anything we do a lot more amenable to them in the long run if they feel like they've been heard.
I agree. We should be talking to all stakeholders. Yep.
I'll share two things on that. One is I think we need to be careful. We're starting to steer a little outside of
Yeah, that's right.
the scope of this meeting.
Sorry.
But as long as we're doing that, I will mention, I do think meetings with landlords, my recollection from what we heard when we were looking at renter restrictions and all that work that happened pre-COVID was that landlords are wary of public meetings on these topics because they feel like they're villainized. So we'll probably have to look at ways for council meetings to meet with them individually so that they're not necessarily public meetings.
Great.
But I think that can be facilitated.
Great.
Or a subcommittee, subcommittee of council members.
Maybe an ad hoc subcommittee that doesn't have the same Brown Act requirements and can meet with them and still glean the same info, but bring it back to the whole council more in more general terms as opposed to specific individuals.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we can work on that.
Great.
Okay, so what I have so far is just to kind of recap your feedback is we've got some good direction on what we want to think about for next year. And that includes recognizing that we're still in COVID and there's continuing need and greater needs. So we want to likely continue funding those we've been funding, find ways to increase funding within the realms of what the city can support and under the context that we're increasing funding because of COVID, not because this will become the norm. We'll be focused additionally on mental health oriented projects and collaborative projects and potential capacity building projects, whether it's individual nonprofits building capacity or even better, a group of nonprofits building capacity. And so we'll work on that and bring that back. Additionally, we want to look at the housing funding and see if it's part of this process or another process. And we will want to look at all of this under the context of the recovery initiative to determine where there's overlap versus what should be specifically for economic development type funding.
Sounds good.
Yeah, great.
Great.
And so our next meeting, we'll schedule it once we have a good handle on when the recovery initiative report should be done and out on the street before the end of the month. And then how quickly we can gather the and summarize and analyze the mid-year reports. So my guess is probably within a month, early March, we can reconvene. And by then we'll have developed a little bit more of a plan for next year for you to comment and further refine and talk about in the context of the recovery initiative. And we'll give you your mid-year update on the existing funding.
Great. Excellent.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
I know this is a lot of hard work during this, during a short couple of months, but I think it's worth it. And you guys have done a great job.
Yeah. Well, this program, I think, has really great impact on the community. And I think it's part of what strengthened our relationships with nonprofits is one, there's more trust and more collaborative, working collaboration going on. But also we've increased the capacity of our nonprofits to do more work. And through that increased capacity, we're able to have influence over where they're targeting their efforts and working together. So I think it's a win-win all the way around.
I certainly appreciate it and look forward to it. I've actually already been getting emails from nonprofits that we haven't funded previously, asking about the program, its requirements, when it opens up. So there's always interest.
Yeah. There's a lot of need. Yeah. And I hate saying no.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
The hardest part about this job is saying no.
Okay, well, thank you for everything.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Very efficient today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.